Well, Luke, Keir Starmer was on LBC leading Britain's conversation, and let's just say he led Britain's conversation in a rather surprising direction, didn't he?
Yes, he did, Michael. Today we're going to be having a discussion about Keir Starmer failing to condemn a white nationalist on LBC radio. Just a crazy thing to say.
Yeah.
Keir Starmer was on LBC. He and Nick Ferrari, the host of the show he was on, were having a discussion about Millwall fans booing kneeling players, which occurred last week.
Yes.
And firstly, let's get into Nick Ferrari, who had some thoughts on the matter. So here's the clip.
Even Les Ferdinand, who you'll probably know, just to remind my listeners, was a very successful footballer, happens to be a black fellow himself. He's now the first black man to be a director of football. He's with the Championship Queen's Park Rangers, and he says it is hollow. It's like a fancy hashtag or a lapel. It's his achieving nothing.
Well, I don't think that's right. I think the
he's
counter...
a black man who played football for England. I mean, he's in a position of knowledge, isn't he?
No, he is, of course, and I respect his view, of course. It doesn't mean I agree with it. I think that what's happened over the many years, this is the counter-argument, it's quite a powerful one, is that there is racial inequality, there is injustice, and from time to time it becomes an issue, it's looked at for a few weeks, and then it goes away. And this is an attempt to keep the focus on it until things really change.
Hasn't the round now focused just on taking the knee? And the important issue of getting black managers, black directors of football, black chairmen or chairwomen of clubs, I mean, that's been lost because we just take the knee. So
no, I don't think it's one or the other. I think you can do both, and it's a way of drawing attention to it.
I think that clip there was good from Starmer. He pushes back against Nick Ferrari, who says basically taking the knee is just symbolic and doesn't do anything, and Starmer's like, well, no, it doesn't have to. And he's right, it doesn't have to. Why would taking the knee shift the conversation? Unless you want the players taking the knee to shift the conversation, if that's what you're trying to drive at. And I have to say, Keir Starmer, he gets himself into this mess in the first place by just going on Nick Ferrari's LBC show. This was a guy who, a few months ago, who said to a black woman, when she was complaining about racism in this country, he said something like, well, I ask this sincerely. If you don't like it, then why don't you leave? That's what he said to her. And he didn't get any pushback. And I guess Starmer, he put himself in a compromising position. It really shouldn't be a good idea to go on his show, considering what he has said. And he's pushing back against the kneeling, of course. And obviously he can do that in this country because, there is a hierarchy of racism and, black people are kind of near the bottom of it. But I just think overall, bad idea to go on his show in the first place. But at least he did push back against that.
Well, I would say that going on, the show of somebody who, let's say, has said some less than favourable things regarding Black Lives Matter in the past, it could be a good thing to do and an opportunity, especially seeing as being on the radio, there are all sorts of rules about being impartial and things like that. So being a guest a lot of the time can actually give you a good opportunity to express your opinion in a way you might otherwise not. And if you're appearing on a show of somebody who is more on the reactionary side when it comes to race, it can be a good opportunity to express your non-racist opinions. Those fantastic non-racist opinions. But obviously what you would need to be able to then do is be very adept at recognizing problematic things people are saying about race and making sure that you're picking up on it and responding to it. So, Keir Starmer going on the show, it's fine as long as he's able to identify what people are saying, the racial implications of what they're saying, and then responding to it effectively. Good old Keir.
Yes, and he does that for the first bit, I think. However, the second clip, oh dear me, it all goes downhill for Keir Starmer.
Pear-shaped.
Yes, so we have this caller called Gemma, who called in initially to say that her husband was at the Millwall game, her husband booed the Black Lives Matter kneeling, and Nick Ferrari then decides to ask her why. So let's hear.
Sorry, you didn't quite explain, if I may go there again. Why did he choose to boo, sorry?
Because if anything, the racial inequality is now against the indigenous people of Britain because we are set to become a minority by 2066. And taking the knee, bringing the political sphere into the football arena, and we just have to look across to the Middle East. Israel has a state law that they are the only people in that country to have self-determination. Well, why can't I, as a white British female, have that same right?
Final point to you on this, Sir Keir.
But Gemma, we all have those rights. This is about recognising some injustice has gone on for a very, very long time. And I think people were genuinely moved this year and want to make sure that injustice is dealt with. And, people will look at it different ways. But I think the vast majority of people do want a more equal society.
Gemma, thank you. To other calls, Dominique in Islington.
Thank you, Gemma.
That was such a non-response. Like, I'm sorry, I know we've got so much to say, but it's just like crazy how little of a, like, not only did he completely miss the point, he just didn't even respond to anything. He just kind of said a random load of nonsense.
The kind of a wet liberal response, like, oh yes, we all want good things for everyone. Well, this caller, Gemma, clearly does not. She is worried that white people are going to be a minority in 2066, and what she is espousing is what is called the Great Replacement Theory, which ultimately says that white people are being genocided. Basically, they're being run out of their homeland, they're being run out of, Europe, and you look at the Christchurch shooter in New Zealand, he was inspired by this conspiracy theory. People in Charlottesville in 2017, they marched saying the Jews will not replace us. It's probably worse than cultural Marxism, which is the excuse that people who are definitely not racist made about Millwall fans booing the Black Lives Matter kneeling last week. That is because the cultural Marxist conspiracy theory is the theory that Jewish people are trying to turn blacks and whites against each other for a race war. And this, the Great Replacement Theory, is a bit more sinister. What it's saying is that Jews are trying to genocide white people, which I would say was worse. It just edges out cultural Marxism on the old right conspiracy theories. And yeah, Starmer basically just has that flung in his face. It was quite obvious what she was saying when she talks about white British people and being a minority, indigenous people in their own country. And he's just like, no, you have those rights, Gemma, don't worry about it. Just, like you said, Michael, a complete non-response to this very pernicious Great Replacement Theory.
Yeah, it's very confusing what he says, because he says something like, everybody wants those rights, and it's not really clear what the point there is. Like, everyone wants those rights to have their own nation. It's very confusing. I tell you what, we've come a long way from when Gordon Brown called a woman a bigoted old woman for complaining about racism. Remember back when Labour leaders used to be like that?
Well, that's the thing. He had to apologise for it.
I know. That's the fun. Yeah, I know. That's
the press attacked him for it, and that was, a first clue, really, that we're in for a pretty rough decade. If that's going to be the case, if a Labour leader can't just come out against racism, simple racism like that. But yeah, that was the Gillian Duffy situation. Yeah. But anyway, Michael, tell us why the Great Replacement Theory is not accurate. Surprisingly.
Yeah, well, I mean, I haven't done a whole load of looking into this, but the specific statistics she mentions is this, and this is something which lots of people don't focus on, especially people who have a very racialist understanding of this issue, which I imagine would apply to this woman, which is that this is talking specifically about white Britons being a minority by 2066. And there's so many caveats here, but the biggest one would be, first of all, this is not white people. This isn't talking about black and brown people taking over or whatever else these people imagine. It's talking about just white British people being taken over, in the biggest air quotes possible, by Eastern Europeans will be a huge part of it. So from the perspective of how the average English street's going to look, it's not really going to make any kind of difference. And then also there's the fact that white Irish people are not considered white British a lot of the time, because obviously Ireland isn't a part of Britain. And then there's the very huge caveat that this doesn't include people who are mixed race or mixed heritage. So you could have a situation where lots of these people who are not considered white British might be 1/4 Pakistani, and they might say they're white British / Pakistani or anything like that. So all of these caveats make you think, well, okay, is it really going to be white British people being a minority? Then of course there's the fact that there won't be another minority bigger than white people. It will just be that all other minorities will be collectively bigger than white British people. And then there's the fact this is all in 2066 based on these massive amount of speculation. And of course, that's all before you get to the fact that you don't have to be the largest demographic group in your society in order to be, privileged, or in order to be fairly represented in that society. So yeah, a whole load of caveats, and I could go into it for ages. That's just a basic rundown on beginning to unearth how wrong this woman is with this Great Replacement white supremacist conspiracy theory.
Yeah, and that's the thing. She's, she says she's bothered about native Britons not having rights, but what she's bothered about is the fact that other people who aren't white have rights. And she talks about Israel, using Israel as an example, and we'll get into that later. But but the thing is, Michael, that this is important because this is the leader of the opposition, of a supposed left-wing party. If even he can't push back against such blatant white nationalism, then who can? If that conspiracy theory gains traction in the media or on Facebook, etc., and with our press, and to be honest, it already has to a sizable degree as well, as we'll get into, then the Great Replacement theory could just be a common sense thing in 5 years' time if Keir Starmer just lets that woman just roll over him and doesn't challenge her at all. And that's why it's quite bad. And I have to come back to this, Michael. I always do whenever Keir Starmer says something ridiculous and gets away with it, which he kind of has with this one. Imagine if it was Corbyn. Imagine if Jeremy Corbyn had been in Keir Starmer's situation. And I want to look at a tweet from a journalist. He's called Sonny Hundal. He's a journalist at Open Democracy. He's supposedly liberal or left-wing or whatever. This was his tweet after it happened. No, we don't need a full investigation every time Starmer's response doesn't match what activists want. There are bigger problems to worry about. And essentially just dismissing the idea that Starmer did anything wrong here by not challenging white nationalism on mainstream radio after people quite rightly were angry with him. And it's crazy that when Corbyn is no longer leader and Starmer is, it's fine not to challenge racism, and it's actually the smart, sensible thing to do. I mean, actually, maybe Corbyn would not have such a hard time on this since this caller was attacking Black Lives Matter. Of course, we know how there is, like I said before, this hierarchy of racism in the UK. So maybe he would have been fine. But I just find it crazy that you have people just trying to give Starmer a pass for this.
Yeah, I also find it funny how he said something about it, if it doesn't line up with the activist version of what he wants to say. And it's like, this isn't an activism thing. I can understand somebody saying specifically on Black Lives Matter, he's not always going to have to line up with that. But this is the idea of white people being under attack in the UK. This isn't some, specific Black Lives Matter thing. This is just basic not being a racist white nationalist. And apparently, Keir Starmer is even under no obligation to line up with that basic standard. And of course, Jeremy Corbyn would definitely be. Well, again, it's a question of, would he be attacked more because it's Jeremy Corbyn, or would he be attacked less because it's about black people and the press is a bit weird about that?
Yeah, being a bit weird is being a bit kind to the press. But and then we have Emma Burnell stating, "Let's stare at our own belly buttons." Another journalist who describes herself as a socialist, and Sonny Hundal replies, "This is all I want, just creating controversy around him. Not like we have bigger issues to be concerned about." And again, I would suggest that, Keir Starmer not challenging white supremacy probably is a pretty big issue. And if this was Corbyn, oh God, they'd be all over it. Absolutely no principles. Now their guy's in charge. Yeah, he can just make as many mistakes as they like and it's all okay. Don't worry about it.
That's the big thing, the hypocrisy of it, the fact that, ultimately, how was it not a bigger issue when were about to go off the cliff when it came to Brexit in 2019, and yet a relatively small number of anti-Semitism issues was enough to make the entire election about that. Apparently, there weren't other issues back in 2019, so they had to focus on anti-Semitism, but now it's about, white nationalist rhetoric about the Great Replacement. Oh, there are other issues and we shouldn't focus on this. The hypocrisy is blatant, as it has been with a lot of the anti-Corbyn stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. But now I want to get on to, why did Keir Starmer not challenge? Yes, of course, he was a coward for not pushing back, but there is a sad reality behind why I don't think he'd said anything, why he just gave, like we've said, a non-response. And the problem is that if he called that caller a racist, then the British press would attack him for it. Maybe not initially, but they'd have their targets on Starmer. And that is the sad reality, like I said. That caller didn't get that 2066 stat from some fringe website like Stormfront, but instead they probably got it from the Daily Mail, the most popular paper in Britain. As you can see right now, there's an article on your screen written by Tim Shipman from 2010 titled, "By 2066, White Britons will be outnumbered if immigration continues at current rates." And who is Tim Shipman now? The political editor of the Sunday Times. The biggest, most respected broadsheet in UK media. And he's the political editor of it. And he wrote that article. And so you can blame the far right as well, if you want. But the fact is, when this kind of material can be picked up from your local newsagents, then, I think we have to look kind of inwards. And I'm going to go on a bit of a rant here about British media and how basically they have created this climate where Starmer feels uneasy about challenging white supremacy. So, for example, you have this woman called Julie Burchell, who was a columnist for The Telegraph. Today, she had her book publisher drop her after she called a Muslim journalist a paedophile worshipper because of that journalist's religion. This is a great story, so I'm going to go through it. This is from The Independent. Julie Burchell's book deal with Hatchet has been cancelled after she was accused of making Islamophobic comments towards a fellow journalist. The forthcoming book by the controversial Sunday Telegraph columnist, titled, of course it's titled this, Welcome to the Woke Trials, How #Identity Killed Progressive Politics. I mean, it's just like a series of buzzwords with these guys at this point. My God. Was due to be published by Hatchet Division, Little Brown next spring. However, on Sunday the 13th of December, Burchell began tweeting at journalist and writer Ash Sakir after she criticised Rod Liddell from a 2012 Spectator article in which he claimed to have chosen against a career as a teacher because he feared he would become a sex offender. Yes, that is what was published in The Spectator, a right-wing magazine, in 2012. The only thing stopping me from being a teacher was that I could not remotely conceive of not trying to shag the kids, Liddell wrote. We're talking secondary level here, by the way, and even then I don't think I'd have dabbled much below year 10, as it is now called. So Ash Sakir saw that and criticised it, rightfully I'd say, and Julie Burchell eventually responded to her by saying, but Ash, I don't worship a paedophile. You do. So Julie Burchell there was defending Rod Liddell for saying he would shag kids by being quite Islamophobic. And it's just a wonderful British story that you have paedophilia involved, you have racism involved, and yeah, you have book publishers dropping books from random Sunday Telegraph columnists as well.
Sorry, just to butt in, but obviously I said that I thought I knew Julie Burchell, and I was looking her up and I found that she definitely can't be accused of being anti-Semitic. She considers herself a philo-Semite. She actually wrote a book called Unchosen, The Memoirs of a Philo-Semite. And she herself is not Jewish, which I guess is what the Unchosen is referring to, because she's not one of the chosen people. But it says that she became a Lutheran and later a self-confessed Christian Zionist. And some people have criticized her, though. For example, Rabbi Eli Tikva Sarah told The Independent, she's got a kind of Hollywood view of Jews. You know, Jews are so clever. We've survived. Basically, lots of Jewish people think she's almost like fetishizing Judaism because,
it sounds like that, yeah.
Yeah. And it's just, very strange. But I guess the good news is she's not anti-Semitic. So she's not like Corbyn.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She's much better than Corbyn, obviously. Yeah. But that's the thing. That's just, like I said, it's just a perfectly British media story. You've got Islamophobia, you've got paedophile talk, and then you've got this weird obsession with Jewish people and Zionism. Just perfectly British all round, I'd say. But yeah, that was just one example I used from today to illustrate the point. But I've got another example from today, Michael. Do you want to hear it?
Yes.
So today as well, we had this report from the Home Office, which stated most child sex abuse gangs are white people.
Oh, yeah, I did see that.
Yeah. So this is from The Guardian. Most child sexual abuse gangs made up of white men. Home Office report says, study of England, Scotland and Wales dispels myth of Asian grooming gangs popularised by the far right. The majority of child sexual abuse gangs are made up of white men under the age of 30, the official paper has said. So this is interesting because what do they mean when they say the far right has popularised this? Surely by the far right they'd have to mean the Sunday Times, the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, the BBC, ITV, and numerous MPs from all political parties as well. This Asian grooming gang thing has been a constant right-wing, I guess, meme, and this has been dotted throughout all of our media as well. So again, it's another case of, we're passing the buck to the right wing, but you just delve into, our media and you see how much they kind of feed these narratives. And yeah, just moving on as well to Brexit to finish off our examples. I think, you could say Brexit was a bit of a shock, but it also could be viewed as quite a predictable outcome when all of our media are screaming, some more than others, from the rooftops about how scary foreigners are. And they have been doing it for the last 15 years. So yeah, we can look at our modern political situation that we find ourselves. We're about to leave the EU properly in a few weeks' time. And we can also look just today about the kind of stuff going on in our media to see that, yes, the sad reality, just to go back to the original point, is that if Keir Starmer went out and attacked this great replacement theory, then he may, and perhaps he was thinking this, be now a target for the British press, because I think I've shown they're quite racist, the British press, a lot more racist than you would initially think. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think it's an example of in the press they like to try and be balanced in a way where the problem is that a lot of this country does have some racist ideas, and the balanced view then is to say, well, you need to make sure that you're showing both sides, and you can't call one group of people that are bigger. And to be honest, I will say this. I think, yes, Keir Starmer could not have called that woman a racist or a Nazi or anything like that. I think that would have just been, that would not have been good for him. But I will say this, I don't think that's necessarily an excuse, and I'm sure you agree it's not an excuse either, but the thing I specifically mean is that it's terrible to say this, but he should have worded his objection to the remark the woman made. Obviously, there should have been an objection at all. It should have been worded diplomatically. So he should have said something like, oh, well, the fact that, pretty much what I said, the fact that white British people might be a minority doesn't mean that they're in a bad situation. It doesn't mean that they aren't properly represented in society and that they're underprivileged or anything like that. He could have made that point, and he didn't have to call her a racist. And therefore, you can't use the fact that British press is racist as an excuse for, or British press is, let's say, unkind to people who are too anti-racist.
I mean, I don't know. I still think if he said something like that, he might have got a bit of pushback. That's the thing, man.
Yeah.
And you're right, though. Like, even if he had like we said before, this is quite a bad thing to hear on national radio. He should have pushed back against it, and he was cowardly not to.
Yeah.
And that, I guess,
exactly.
Yeah, and that, I guess, sums up Keir Starmer's tenure as Labour leader pretty well so far. But yeah, let's move on from Keir Starmer now and just talk about, I guess, the situation in the UK a bit more, because I have a theory, Michael, and this call kind of confirms it, or at least I would like to think so, that the UK lets racism slide more than America. Because if this happened in America, or if I use the example of Nick Ferrari saying what he said earlier to that black woman, well, why don't you leave if you don't like it? If he had said that in America, Nick Ferrari would have lost his job. If he was on any other show apart from Fox News, and LBC isn't like the Fox News of radio in the UK, and that it really should be, but unfortunately it's not. It's just kind of mainstream, and I do think, why is this the case? Why did we just let racism slide like that? Because there has been no uproar after this. There have been some people who are left wing like us, a bit angry about Starmer online, but the BBC have ignored it. For instance, there hasn't been a scandal, and well, I think I've identified 3 reasons why that might be the case, and one of them is there's not as many people of colour in the UK. We only have about 3% of our population is black compared to 13%.
Wait, hold on a minute, Luke. I thought white Britons were going to be a minority in 2026.
Oh, God, yes. Only 3% compared to 13% in America, and that makes a bit of a difference. And the UK has never had the racist past on this particular island, of course, like America has had in their borders. And that makes a difference to how British people see themselves and whether we actually have a problem with race. And also there is this British disposition, thanks to our media mainly, I'd say, not to care about things like justice or morality or being good. We don't really care about doing the right thing in this country. And again, I blame our press for that a lot. I think the situation regarding race in the UK kind of ironically means that racism is easier to get past here than in America. What do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's, there's no maybe about it really. It's true that in the UK, I think part of it is maybe because I think possibly it's because we're more polite, you don't want to accuse people of things. You kind of just want to let things slide because we have that attitude in our society of like, you don't want to kick up too much of an uproar. Whereas in America, they like to get more angry about things and they like to have more controversy.
I talked about with, doing the right thing. Really, it's kind of in that range where it's like, oh yeah, he probably said something bad, but I just won't say anything because who cares really? We don't see ourselves as moral people here in the UK media.
I think the Gillian Duffy thing and Gordon Brown was a really good example of that, because obviously she said, what are you going to do about all these immigrants coming to this country? And he said, oh, it's a bigoted old woman. And everyone was kind of outraged. And I think one reason why people are outraged is because really, when someone says something like that, you're supposed to just kind of smile and be like, yeah, I know, it's annoying, but I'm trying to deal with it. That's kind of how politicians are supposed to respond to things like that. Yeah. They're supposed to go, oh yeah, I know, the immigration is a problem. We're going to deal with it.
They're not meant to make a stand and give a nice speech against it like an American politician would.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, and also this woman, of course, was talking about Indigenous Britons, and I mentioned this conspiracy theory, the Great Replacement, is quite pernicious, and I think this could be quite an issue in the UK because it's harder to push back on that, the Indigenous talk, since in America, everyone but Native Americans are immigrants or have descended from immigrants, but here Indigenous people are white. So therefore, the Great Replacement theory can unfortunately have more weight over here because white people can think of ourselves as a white country. You can think that if you're white, and you have the British mindset of let's not make things better for everyone, only ourselves, and the rest can get fucked. which means there's probably going to be an increase in white British people seeing other ethnic minorities who live in their neighbourhood as a threat. I do think this is the case in Britain. There is this attitude which is like, well, there's only so much to go around, so therefore if the immigrants are coming in, then I'm getting less. And we're not a very hopeful people. And yeah, again, I think the media has something to do with that. And you combine that with the fact that the indigenous people here are white. And that is going to mean that this theory could gain, again, real traction here, even more so than in America. I am kind of concerned about that. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the idea that in the UK, because we are more negative, maybe we're less likely to see immigration as an opportunity. We don't really have what they have in the US in the more liberal circles. Obviously, in the conservative circles, it's a different thing. But in the US, of this idea that immigrants can come in and contribute to the society because, obviously the saying we all know is America was founded by immigrants. And that's a very easy way to incorporate a pro-immigrant narrative into your politics. In the UK, we don't really have that. What we do have, of course, is points about how the UK has been invaded by Vikings and Romans and all that sort of stuff. But even then, another thing we have is that the UK hasn't really been invaded for 1,000 years. So that, yeah, like I say, it's a very strong argument to be made that in the UK, there is an authentically indigenous population that is white. And that obviously would be a reason why that kind of narrative could work. And I think perhaps there does need to be, and I certainly think there could be, and this would be too much of a tangent to go into, but I think there might need to be a way to create a sort of British zeitgeist that is more pro-immigration, perhaps a British paradigm that can incorporate immigration as a positive, which we don't really have right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, immigration has been viewed as a positive in America. In this country, totally not the case. And yeah, that's why the Great Replacement theory could, unfortunately, be a bit popular over here. More so than in America. But let's now talk about what the caller said when she drew inspiration from Israel's racist nation-state law. That law in Israel says that democracy in Israel is for Jews and Jews only. And essentially, she wants Britain to be a democracy for whites and whites only. And of course, like we said, Keir Starmer responded by saying, we all have those rights. Just an incredible lack of pushback there. But actually, to be fair, maybe Keir Starmer heard her praising Israel and was like, whoa, now I can't call her racist. Since I have been trying to expel anyone who says anything bad about Israel from Labour for factional reasons, that's a no-go. I can't criticise her now. She's praised Israel. It's just impossible for me to do that. What do you think about that, Michael?
Definitely. And I think Starmer, he doesn't... I mean, a lot of politicians, this isn't a criticism of Starmer particularly, but I doubt they have the real, I guess, political philosophy to actually attempt to make any kind of distinction between why the UK couldn't have that law while at the same time not being, not feeling like they're criticising Israel. So yeah.
But it's kind of hard to do that when she literally brings up Israel.
Yeah.
And, I mean, he could try, but he's not going to be that successful. And that's because there is this link between the far right and Israel. Now, ethnic supremacy, which is what occurs in Israel, as the caller said, is seen as a template for the far right in European countries. It's a template that they want to recreate. So when we have centrist sensibles ask facetiously, or why on earth are the left or Jeremy Corbyn, for instance, so obsessed with Israel? Well, I won't say obsessed, but they're concerned about Israel for that very reason. The far right loves Israel because Israel is an ethno-state. Why, when you see far right protests, do you a lot of the time see Israeli flags? When I see racists on Twitter, tweeting their racist things, they have, the British flag, the American flag, and the Israeli flag as well in their bios. It's because racists admire Israel. They are the only country in what we would call the West to have this political situation where laws are dictated by your race. And you have to deliberately shove your head in the sand not to see that. So yeah, I just made this point to talk about the whole thing about, criticising Israel, why do people do it, why are you so obsessed with Israel, blah, 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 blah. Well, as we can see from the call, the far right views it as a goal to aim for. And if you have, white supremacists aiming for to have a country like Israel, don't you think that maybe criticising Israel is not that bad a thing to do? I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
No, yeah, I think it's definitely true that a lot of people, especially nowadays, and the sincerity of this could be argued, but a term you do hear in some white nationalist circles is peaceful ethnic cleansing, and the logic of peaceful ethnic cleansing being that It's ethnic cleansing, but it's not violent. It's just kind of peacefully removing people. And the argument they again use is Israel. They say, well, Israel was ethnically cleansed. I mean, it's a bit generous to call it peaceful, but for some reason they use Israel as an example of that, of an idea of a country that was formed in a relatively modern context that's considered democratic by lots of people, and it is an ethno-state. So yeah, it's definitely a goal that's to be aimed for. And certainly the issue is right now, criticizing Israel at all is considered so anathema in the contemporary political context that you can't have an argument about it. And exactly how much you should criticize Israel is a debate. I was thinking recently about how there's being anti-Israel in terms of critical of the things Israel has done, and there's being anti-Israel in terms of not wanting Israel to exist. And that's kind of, I guess, the spectrum of the debate, and where you should fall in that spectrum. That's where the debate should be happening. But right now we have a situation where you can't even have the debate because that is considered anti-Semitic.
Some people don't even want that debate, and they're not even people, again, who are far right. That's the thing. That's what's crazy about it. But yeah, obviously criticizing Israel is something that, I would hope that people who maybe were on the fence about it, should we not, after seeing somebody who was a white nationalist look at Israel as a goal to achieve, as something to aim for, maybe that would trigger in their heads, maybe, criticising Israel ain't that bad a thing. But then again, Jeremy Corbyn has done it and the left wing has done it, and that is the thing that many, centrist sensibles, people like Sonny Hindle, who I mentioned before, hate most of all. So, hey, who knows if that'll change anyone's minds? Probably not. But yeah, I guess overall on the Starmer thing, what is also sad is you see his response. It's awful, it's terrible, but it didn't really surprise me. Like we said before, cowardly is a good way to sum up Starmer's tenure, and considering how, right-wing, anti-immigrant, pro-racist narratives, I guess is the best way to describe it, are being now pushed more and more in Britain after Brexit, and now we have a situation where the leader of the opposition doesn't feel like he should or he can call out a white nationalist conspiracy theory on national radio. Yeah, this country could keep veering towards the edge, Michael, of a cliff, and I don't even know how far down the cliff goes. What do you think?
No, yeah, I agree with you. We literally have no idea where we're going, and politically, it's just a complete mess. And it feels like all the parties are weird, all the parties are confused. There's no real semblance of an opposition, and it's kind of just a free for all. And in a free for all, only the crazies win.
Do it! Just do it! Yes, you can!